past year, along with the Eastern Missouri Beekeepers Association, they are now meeting in De Pere on the second Tuesday of the month. So we used to meet on the fourth Tuesday of the month. I just realized tonight I found some flyers from when we were meeting at Schlafly. We're kind of the Gypsy Bee Club in the area. We've moved around quite a bit. We started out, I don't know, 2008, I think, at a coffee shop near Tower Grove Park. We quickly moved to Schlafly Bottle Works in Maplewood. Had a good run there, but you know, as businesses do, they have to expand, and they severely reduced the size of their meeting space. So we had to leave and find another place to meet. We met in Shrewsbury until COVID hit. And then during COVID, we didn't meet for a year, and then we met in the classroom space at Isabee's for a year, I think. And then last year, we, I think, assisted in helping in getting the EMBA revived and met here for the year with that group. As I said, they're meeting on the second Tuesday. Now we're going to be meeting here on the fourth Tuesday so that we're not conflicting with other clubs. Jefferson County also meets on the second Tuesday of the month. We do have a mission statement. Our mission statement. We are, in addition to being gypsies, we're not a dues paying club. So we, prior to last year, passed can at meetings. I'm not going to put everybody on the spot tonight because I know we generally don't carry small bill cash anymore. You know, everybody's got a debit or credit card. But next month we will start passing the can. It is in the back if you want to make a donation. The idea with that is you come to a meeting if you're interested, whether it's, you know, just because you have time, you want to hang out with beekeepers, or it's a particular topic or presenter that you want to hear from. And if you want to support those efforts, we would appreciate the donation, but you are not required in any way to be here every month. We don't have a board per se. Doesn't mean that we shouldn't think about doing that. If anybody wants to be more involved with the club in an associate or a organizational position, I would be happy to entertain that as well. If you are interested in suggesting a topic for a presenter or a speaker, you know, someone personally, or just a topic that you want us to cover or suggest, I'm happy to entertain that as well. Our email address is contact@St. Louis Beekeepers, spelled out SAINT, stlouisbeekeepers.com. I did come up with the theme, so we have a theme for our meetings this year of organically grown. So I'm trying to introduce beekeepers who have not been to our meetings in the past, or maybe reacquaint you if you have been members and coming to our meetings with people in our local community that are, you know, have been doing beekeeping for a while and have become master beekeepers, master gardeners. Eleanor Schumacher has a bunch of credentials. I mean, you know, so we have some local people that are worth you getting to know or you know, following in whatever capacity that is. So that's the theme for the year. Not that we have to adhere completely to it. I've got a couple of people in other states that I would love if they would be willing to come and speak, either by Zoom or in person. So I'm not gonna, you know, I'll break a rule. It's not really a rule, but it's a theme. So that's what we're gonna be focusing on this coming year for our topics. Many of you know that there's a subgroup of the club that has been raising queens since 2017. A couple of those members are here in the audience. We received 2 USDA SARE grants to support that work. And, I've given presentations on this. I probably will do it again this year. I try to do a presentation on this topic to the club at some point once every year. But for this meeting, I want to mention to you that the 2 things that the grants have supported are equipment expansion and pathogen testing. And the longer we do this, the more that that's reinforced to us that the fact that we are selecting breeder queens after having them tested for pathogen load is very important to what we do. And I'm grateful for the funding because that's very expensive testing to do. We feel very comfortable with what we've done over the 7 years and where we are, where the queens are. We are looking for a few good beekeepers to join us. We can always use a couple volunteers. If anybody is interested in helping out with a queen rearing operation, we do meet during the week. So I would say if you have a 9-to-5 job that you have to go to, this is probably not an opportunity for you. But there is a sign-up sheet back there if you're interested in just even having a conversation and finding out more details about it. As well, part of what our queen rearing project is now has evolved to, in addition to selling queens, we sell overwintered nukes. So this is how we're overwintering our nucleus colonies on top of full strength parent colonies, and we will sell them, take them out of those boxes and put them in a nuke box as soon as we are able to, proof the queen is laying and the colony is functioning correctly and it's a saleable, viable colony. So probably as early as the weather will allow in April, these will be harvested, I'm going to say, for people who have reserved them. Because you are here this evening, we are giving you first dibs if you're interested in getting these nukes. There's a limited amount. We're figuring somewhere between 28 and 38 based on our infrared heat signature camera that we, after this cold spell that we had, we wanted to make sure that we had some good survival. And we did, so we're kind of comfortable to take reservations now. So they're going to be $235. We need $120 deposit to reserve. We'll take deposits for 28. We may have as many as 38. Fingers crossed if everybody survives. So we'll, have a waiting list if you're interested. So these nucleus colonies are the queens that we are breeding in this program that we started, 2017, doing it about 7 years. We're very happy with them. The primary goal or the primary behavior or trait is that they overwinter in our environment. So they're, able to overwinter. We are not selecting for any other trait other than we are removing colonies that show pathogen load or high mite counts that look like they're going to be an issue. So we're culling colonies. We have over the years culled a few colonies that are not up to our standard. We raise queens from the colonies that we send samples off for pathogen testing, the ones that have the lowest pathogen load and look healthy and all of that, right? So these nukes are from this queen rearing program from the last round that were raised in late June or early July. So they're summer queens that have overwintered. And if you're interested in reserving, we have a sign-up sheet in the back. And if you're signing up tonight, we will send you a link to make a deposit. If I don't fill 28 tonight, then we're going to open it up, send the email to the entire club. through our regular email channels. Any questions about this? We also have, from time to time, you know, I am approached or get an email or a phone call from organizations that want a beekeeper to come and give a presentation. And this is for youth, and I think that it takes kind of a unique person or set of skills to teach beekeeping to young kids, not my wheelhouse. But I want to make these opportunities available to people in our club. So again, if you're interested in finding out more details about this particular opportunity, or you just want to be on a list with me so that when we get a call, then I would call you if you're looking for opportunities to present. So that's a sign-up sheet in the back as well. I think that's everything I need to cover, unless anybody has questions. Is that it? Okay. So we have 2 speakers this evening. Charlotte Wiggins has been beekeeper for how many years?
15.
I met you prior to, but kind of worked with you when you were handling some volunteer project for the Heartland Apiculture Conference. Yes. Did anybody attend that at WashU back in, what year was that?
2018.
2018. Yeah. Charlotte was volunteer coordinator?
I was the communications director, and we had over 700 people who went. It was their best conference ever in the history of HAS.
Yes.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah.
That's great to hear.
If any of you know who Sammy Ramsey is, Sammy Ramsey was just, I think he'd just been peer reviewed.
Yes.
And gave he did this like CSI, and he laid out for you his entire indisputable, chronologically laid out, his research on proving, or at the time, because now there's a little variation on this, at the time, he was credited with proving that mites are not bloodsuckers, that they are actually going after their fat body, which is like your liver. Now, 5, 6 years later, they're saying, well, they're kind of doing both. But he was lauded for that research that he did and proof, and he got a standing ovation. It was really a great conference and great timing for his presentation. All right, so I'm going to let you come up, and I'm thrilled to have Charlotte here from Rolla, where she hails, and I'm going to get your presentation queued up here.
We're excited. I brought a couple of members of the Rolla Bee Club. We're an educational nonprofit. We've been in business for 12 years. So Scott Littlejohn, put your hand up, and Christine Richards, who is our treasurer, and our president couldn't make it tonight. But we like to, when I come to lecture, I like to bring them along so they can see how another club is operating, and they can meet some of you. And if you're ever in Rolla, you're welcome to come and visit. We meet the 4th Sunday of the month from 1 to 4. And we also have a teaching aid period, but I don't think we're going to open ours in March. I think you're a little optimistic. We were lucky to get it open in April.
We're trying to get all our new beekeepers in and just get them, into the organization.
I think that's very smart. But we were looking at it going, March might be early. Okay. Sure. Yes, thank you. I think, is this better? Can you hear me better? You back, you in the back, here we go. Just, yeah. Yes, yeah, I clip it. So I've been gardening for 42 years, maybe longer than that, and decided to get bees in 2010 because I like to joke about being a lazy gardener. And I figured I had 65 dwarf fruit trees, well, I can't get this clip, in my 1-acre hillside garden, and I thought the bees would help with pollination. I thought, well, I'll put a hive in the back 40, not pay any attention to them. They'll take care of pollinating the bees and everything will be fine. Well, I didn't count on falling in love. I adore my bees. And from that, I started teaching classes in 2012 because the Extension Office was getting a lot of requests for that. You might remember that Save the Bees vibe was in the media. And I had 75 people in one class. And after we finished that class, the students said, could we please have a club to support us? And so that's where the Raleigh Bee Club started, as a club to support the students. That's the mission we continue. Anybody's welcome, but the priority is to make sure our students get on their feet and get started in the right steps when they're starting beekeeping. And we have a class coming up this Sunday, and we normally have it full. We have a limited amount of seating because we really want to have 1-to-2, 1-to-3 ratio between the coaches. We don't call them mentors, we call them coaches, and the new students. And we just had a last minute cancellation. So if you happen to are interested in a bee class, we have one coming up January. Go to the Raleigh Bee Club to find out more information. Okay, so I'm going to be talking about planting for pollinators, and that includes, of course, bees, since bees are the largest group of pollinators. How many of you have seen those plant these for bees flyers that fly around social media, right? How many? Yeah. How many of you have them, have downloaded them, or tried any? Anybody? Okay, a couple of you have. So how many of you are don't have bees yet? You're just beginning beekeepers. Okay. How many of you already have bees? Maybe first 3 years? Okay. Anybody over 5 years in beekeeping? Oh, excellent. Okay. Good. Nice, good combination of that. So I want to talk about the planting for pollinators from a beekeeper's perspective. So we all know that bees have challenges today. This happens to be my South Apiary last week with the snow. Our bees have been challenged by a lot of things: pathogens, pests, pesticides, but probably the area that people are spending the most time on right now is nutrition. If you haven't seen the Honeybee Health Coalition new report that came out January 1st of this year about nutrition, make sure to go to the website and get it. I read it this afternoon, and there was one fact that came out that I was sharing with somebody. So we know that it takes 2 million flowers, nectar of 2 million flowers, to make 1 pound of honey. How much honey do you think a colony, 50,000 bees, needs throughout the year? Not just over winter, but throughout the year. Any guesses? 100? Okay, 100 pounds over here. Do I hear 200? Okay. Okay, I'm still trying to wrap my mind around this, and I'm a gardener. 700 pounds. That's 1 billion with a bee, 400,000 million flowers. I don't know how many zeros that is, but it's a lot of flowers. And so it's really important for us as beekeepers to understand that it's critical that we're giving them food. So why is this a challenge for our bees? Well, we know we have large monoculture fields. In other words, they plant one crop. And for bees to be healthy, they need to have 11 amino acids out of the plants that they visit, the nectar that they visit, the pollen that they collect. We as humans need 33. And I still think they're 1/60th of our size, but they need 1/3 of our amino acids. That's another one of those things I ponder every once in a while. We know we have flowerless landscapes, right? We have an area in this country the size of Texas with turf grass. Don't get me started on turf grass because I'm not a fan. But the importance of that for bees is that turf grass does nothing to help pollinators. It provides no food. I wonder at people who it's expensive to establish. The minute it has any growth, what do? We slice it right off, right? We go out and mow it. We have to feed it artificially. And yes, I know that there's a purpose for turf grass But when I see a garden with just turf grass, it's ugly to me. I want to see flowers that have insects, right, interacting, because it's an ecosystem that we need to build. So those flowerless landscapes need to be rethought. We have overzealous weed control. I don't use the word weed. I've banished that from my vocabulary, because most of those plants that you don't want are actually herbs that have lost their way. We've forgotten what their value is in our lives. We also have destruction of native plant communities. I used to work with the Forest Service and used to listen to some of these presentations by biologists, right? They have a lot more better information than I do about the value of these little microclimates and micro areas, natural areas where you only find a certain kind of dragonfly or a certain kind of native bee or a certain kind of fly. These are all pollinators. And so it's important for us to understand that all of these puzzle pieces together make it very difficult for pollinators to survive. Then, of course, lack of meadows and cover crops. Another significant step that we can use, planting cover crops, but we don't always think about that when we're gardening and planting. Okay, pesticide contamination, huge issue. And interestingly enough, there's some studies that say, guess who causes the most pesticide contamination inside and outside the hive? Beekeepers. Why? Because we don't read the directions of some of the miticides, insecticides, pesticides that we have, right? How many of you have a wasp in the corner of your deck and you get that can of Raid and you, right? You're going to get those wasps and you miss. So what have you done? You've spread all of that stuff throughout your little ecosystem. And frankly, you don't need to do that with your wasps. You could get a bowl, go up there, put it up there, cut that little wasp nest down, put a piece of magazine over it, and relocate it. I actually keep birdhouses around my yard for both bumblebees and wasps because they will nest in birdhouses, and that provides natural pest control. So we just need to rethink how we handle the issues and challenges that we have in our garden. Okay, so when we think about what do bees need, when we talk about, I've had a number of beekeepers who said, "Why, Charlotte, I'm a beekeeper, I don't need to know about flowers." And I have gardeners who tell me, I'm a gardener, I just need to know about plants. I don't need to know about pollinators or bees or anything else. The reality is they're interconnected. They depend on each other. As a matter of fact, I read a survey that says pansies in France are now genetically mutating so that they self-pollinate because they don't have access to the pollinators that they used to. Their colors are less vibrant. Their sizes are smaller because what do flowers do, right? They attract pollinators by having a face. For lack of a better word, I think of pansies as having faces, right? By having flowers that are bright and colorful, and 3/4 of the time of the pollinator plants that we need as bees, as beekeepers, we can't even see the colors that the flowers have. Some of them have little landing strips, to show the pollinators, like, come visit here. So we need to understand that we're having changes in our environment and the environment of our bees. And there are things that we can do to help them. So some plants produce one, right? So we focus on plants in early spring that produce what? Pollen, right? And then later in the season, as we go into the nectar flow, what do we want? We want nectar. Not all plants produce both. Not all plants produce, some plants are wind pollinated. So we'll talk about the 6 families that do provide food for pollinators and bees. But let's start with nectar. I call this flight fuel, right? These are the carbs that bees need to be able to winter over and to use for flight fuel. So in the wintertime, when it's mild, do we need more stored honey or less stored honey? It's mild.
No.
What? Less. No, you need more. Why do you need more? Because they're gallivanting, right? They're not staying clustered inside the hive. And so we've had very temperate winter here in where I am in Rolla. We just had a cold spell the last few weeks, but they were visiting me in my garage. They were kind of looking, "Hey, what you doing? Where's some flowers?" They're eating up the fly fuel though that they've stored, and so and Scott and Christine and I were making comparisons. Some of our bees have completely gone through their winter stores, the honey that they've stored for winter, because it's a mild winter. So some of the things you learn in beekeeping are opposite what you would think is the natural way of things, and that's an important part of what it is, what we have to do as beekeepers. So you want the nectar because it has sugar, amino acids, and minerals. The optimum is 20 to 25% sugar, and that's what they take the nectar of flowers, they dehydrate it to 18%, and then they store it for winter food. So pollen are the protein, fats, steroids, and micronutrients. The minimum needed again is 20-25%. And this is baby food. This is what the nurse bees take, and with the hypophalangeal gland, they make that into royal jelly, and it becomes baby food. Now, if it was just the fact that we have to learn about the plants and what they do or don't do, we have several other factors that influence that plant and the health of that plant. And some things we have no control over, weather. We don't have control over latitude and longitude unless we want to move our garden someplace. So just remember that even though we want to be able to feed our bees, there are things that happen where we don't have any control. Now, the foundation of good bee nutrition, we think about those lovely flyers with plant these for bees, but we're looking at the wrong end of the plant. We need to be looking at the soil and the root structure of the plant and the interaction between that plant and soil. You have healthy soil, you then have healthy plants. Healthy plants feed the bees, and guess what? The bees then pollinate food that provides us with healthier food. So, how many of you think of soil as dirt? Right? You call it dirt?
Yeah, it might be the little connection there.
Okay, I'm going to just hold it like this. Okay. So I used to work for a gentleman who was a soil scientist. He's now the chief of the Forest Service. And I made the mistake one day in a meeting of saying, we need some more dirt for the front garden. Because we were putting a pollinator garden at our headquarters office. And he turned around and he goes, "Don't you ever call that dirt." I remember that to this day. Because it's not dirt, right? Dirt is a negative thing. Soil is a living, breathing ecosystem. You have more microorganisms in a teaspoon of soil than we have people on this earth. It is a non-renewable resource. It takes 2,000 years to make new soil, and it takes 3,000 to create fertile soil that we would want to grow in. So this is basically a figure that shows you soil starts out as 45% rock. It then gets ground down by water and wind if it's exposed to wind. You have 25% of soil is air, 25% of soil is microorganisms that are living in it, and then you have 5% that are things that you compost, right? The organic matter that you're composting. So understanding that the foundation of our ecosystem is first bugs and soil. So we're focusing on one of them, which is good, but we're forgetting the most important thing that feeds everybody. Okay, so how do you keep your soil healthy? Well, keep your soil planted. I forget the percentage of soil we lose every year because we have rain that comes in and washes it down into our storms water systems. The way you prevent that is by planting cover crops. Clover, red crimson clover, buckwheat. These are easy crops that you can find at most seed companies. They're easy to throw onto the soil and get them to grow. I call buckwheat bee coffee because bees only visit buckwheat until 10 o'clock in the morning. Why is that? Because the plant only produces its nectar that early in the morning. It doesn't produce nectar all day. Not all plants produce nectar all day. No, they produce pollen all day. So you have to learn how your plants interact with those different factors that I talked to. I have a number of people who say, well, I'm just going to fertilize my garden and plant it. wait 6 months. You need to let whatever you're using as compostable materials on your soil, they need to incorporate themselves. Wait at least 6 months. I get wood chips from a recycling center and I let it sit in the back corner of my property for 6 months. I don't touch it. It's too hot when you first get it off the chipper. So you need to let that heat dissipate. Unless you want to use it on a path, then it's perfect because that hot wood chip will kill whatever else is growing in your path. Nematodes. Who had Japanese beetles this last year? Yeah. Nematodes. Okay. This is a microorganism, and they now have them offered. I think Isabees is carrying them now too, for small hive beetles, which is one of the invasive species that gets into hives. They have nematodes that address the Japanese beetles. So what you're doing is you're actually killing the grubs that are in the soil. So you won't deter the Japanese beetles for this year, but the nematodes will eat all those remaining grubs, and you won't have them next year. It's also, you can use milky spores as the same kind of thing where you're treating your soil and the grubs are disappearing. That's why you have moles, right? Moles are going after the grubs for food. So you can use nematodes to make your soil healthier. And then I'm a big mulcher. I can't wait for the first hard frost because I'm out there with those wood chips covering up my flower beds and my trees. Not up to the bark necessarily, but you're leaving like a well around your trees so they can collect water. But you're mulching to prevent the soil from heaving and thawing when the temperatures go up and down. You want to standardize their exposure to a particular temperature through winter so they can stratify themselves and be ready for next spring. So what can you do at home? Compost. How many of you have a freezer? Most of you should have a freezer. You have a little drawer in your freezer that you pull out? That's your composting drawer. Bet you didn't know that. So you get a bag from Walmart or a garbage bag that you use, you put it in that drawer, and you throw your kitchen scraps in there. And then when it's full, you take it outside and you dig a hole somewhere where you have a flower bed or whatever. You dump the kitchen scraps in there. You put soil back on there. You get into the habit of saving your kitchen scraps. Then you're going to start saying, well, I've got more stuff to save. Well, then you buy yourself maybe a 1 gallon, 5 gallon. You can use the paint buckets. You put holes in the bottom. You start putting your scraps in there, and then you put your dried leaves and your grass clippings and some water. Composting is not hard. It's like exercising, though. You have to get into the habit of doing it. And once you do, you'll find that stuff will crumble. It will decompose and become this gorgeous black gold that you can then use to make your soil healthy. You can also compost by using an old coffee can. The one on the left my brothers gave me because he got tired of looking at the Folgers can I like to recycle. I still use that one, by the way. But you can start with having a coffee can if you don't want to put it in your freezer. The idea is you want to collect the compostable material. We throw away 40% of the food that we buy. That is natural fertilizer for your soil. So why are we throwing it out and filling up landfills? Compost it, feed your soils, and don't be adding to the issues that we have with no room for the stuff that we throw away. Now, you will graduate to a bigger composter. I have 6 of them. These are 2. I like the one on the left a little more because it's got a handle, so it's easier to turn. The one on the right is great workout, though, because once it's full, that stuff is heavy. Once it starts getting lighter, when you're turning it, you're not looking at it, you know that it's decomposing inside, right? So you can find a variety of composters online, but when you graduate to this, you'll know that you're a diehard composter, right? And you'll find that your garbage will be a lot less. I used to have your standard municipal garbage container that the city picked up once a week. I'm now down to their smallest container because I compost. I don't throw as much garbage out as I used to. Okay, there were some hands here that said you were beginning beekeepers. So when you take beginning beekeeping classes, most people don't mention this. Kim Flodham told me, the old gentleman who was the editor of Bee Culture magazine who just passed away, that I'm revolutionizing the way beekeeping is taught. I prefer to tell you that it's common sense. You're going to add bees to your garden. What's the first thing that you need to scope out? Any ideas? Your hive locations, right? Where are you going to put them? And when I've done classes, we go to a long discussion about, well, how close should they be to the house? You know, how far should you put them? You know, what hive stands do you put them on? What color do you paint your hives? All really important questions, but the best or the most important consideration is, where are your hives in relation to the food your bees are going to get? Right? They fly within an immediate 2-mile radius of wherever you place them, the maximum of 5 miles. So if you haven't scoped out the area around where you plan to put your hives, you don't know if your bees are going to get food or have access to the nectar and pollen that they need. Now, once you have that, you then need to think about, when is the buffet, nature's buffet, going to be offered. We know, for example, that bees need pollen in spring, early spring, as the bees number. The winter bees turn into summer bees, right? They have that transition at the end of February. So the winter bees that live for 6 months die off, and then the summer bees that live for 6 weeks start eclosing. And then you start seeing what's happening in nature. I was telling Ken, I don't know that he's going to have things March 9th, because we don't know weather-wise whether the trees will be producing the pollen the bees need. And we don't know what will happen with the weather. There are a lot of unknowable things that we have no control over, but more importantly, we have to track. And there's even discussions now about whether pollen substitutes really help bees. I know from my experience, if you give them pollen early, you can cause them to increase their numbers, because the queen says, oh, pollen's coming in, so we've got food for the baby, so I'm just going to lay more eggs, and that you can get early swarming from that as well. So you have to be very careful. Whatever you're doing to your bees, you're affecting their schedules and what they think is happening in nature. In general, plants entice bees to come and pick up the pollen to help the plants reproduce, and they entice the bees with nectar. Okay? And the temperature, which is something we can monitor pretty well, needs to be between 74 and 86 degrees. So if you start looking at when your plants are blooming and when you see an increase in activity of bees bringing pollen in particular back, you'll see there's that 74 to 86 degree range. And I offer that to you because I know for years beekeepers who ask me, well, how do I know what's happening? Remember that bees and plants have had a long-standing relationship, right? They've developed this interdependent relationship. Some plants need bees to help them reproduce, which is pollination, and then the bees have learned to depend on those plants for bee food and flight fuel. Okay, I mentioned that there's 6 plant families that provide food for bees. Not all trees, shrubs, and flowers feed bees. So, asters, does anybody have an example of asters? How about New England asters, right? The little purple flowers, we'll see them in a minute. Figwort, legumes, mint, mustard, and rosa. Remember, 2 million flowers to make 1 pound of honey. Okay, so these are asters. When I think of asters, I think of the New England asters that are very popular to find in home and garden centers in the fall. Zinnias, anything, dianthus, which are like little open petaled flowers, anything that's open and single. You don't want the doubles, because the bees can't then access to where the flowers have the pollen and the nectar. Cosmos are a favorite one. They look like daisies. Zinnias, an absolute favorite. And herbs, right? Chicory, for example, which blooms in August, where I live, is an excellent bee food because it's blooming at a time when there are not a lot of other flowers for bees. Figwort. Now this plant family just got changed a couple of years ago. They had a lot more plants in there. I think of the figwort family as being the butterfly bush, which is in the picture. For native flowers, mullein, you know the mullein that the native Indians use the leaves for baby diapers. Very soft flowers. Well, they have a flower column that goes up and has little yellow flowers all the way around it when they bloom. They're lovely, but people consider them to be weeds. And yet they had medicinal qualities years ago, and we now see them growing on the side of the road. Legumes. This is another big plant family, right? Think of those cover crops. White clover, which is in the picture, peas, beans, peanuts, alfalfa. That's the family that helps secure nitrogen in your soil. See, that's all connected again. Mint. Basil. We used to use marigolds as a insect deterrent, but they've been hybridized so much that they don't have the strength of the smell that deters other insects. So I now use basil around where I don't want insects. And I mix my flowers and my vegetables. I'll show you in just a minute. But the important thing is to think about all those herbs that we've never used or don't know much about are an important family to feed our bees. Now I have cats, so catnip is kind of a given in my garden. I make catnip gifts for my family's cats as well. And so one year I was going to work, and at the time I wore glasses. And it was 7 o'clock in the morning. I look down my hillside and I see these black flowers amid my catnip. And I thought, I didn't know that catnip had flowers. So I walked down there and I keep hearing this middle C sound. It was baby bumblebees. There were so many of them that they covered the catnip, and it looked like catnip was flowering. I just sat down in the middle of that patch of catnip and just took in that experience. So you can feed your bees with some of the herbs that you like to cook with. And of course, there's always the discussion in spring about, is it henbit or dead nettle that's blooming, right? That beekeepers will continue to have that discussion regardless of what's happening in nature. Okay, mustard. We think about broccoli, cabbage, kale, horseradish, rutabaga, stocks. Those are greens, right? The things that we should be eating to be healthier. Kale, for example, is in the 30% crude protein range. So we're talking about some serious protein here. And I had a lady who had seen one of my Planting for Pollinator seminars years ago. And she called me and she said, I've been planting all this stuff, but my pollinators, my bees aren't getting anything. And I said, okay, what did you plant? Well, broccoli. Pardon me. And I said, well, did you let it go to seed? Well, no, I cut the broccoli heads off. You have to have flowers, right? And I explained to her, I said, well, that's great that you planted all that. Maybe collect a little bit for you, but let the plant go to seed so that the bees have access to the flowers. And then this is the most delicious of the 6 plant families, right? The Rosa family. Think berries, strawberries, blueberries, raspberries. This is a pear. This is my 35-year-old now semi-dwarf pear tree that sat off my deck for 30 years without ever blooming. I even forgot I had it. The year after I had bees, it gave me my first pears. And now I collect 2 to 3 bushels of pears every fall from the tree because of pollination. And if you start looking now for the first flowering trees around here, anybody know what serviceberry looks like? Some people confuse it with dogwoods, right? It tends to bloom end of January, early February. Why is it called serviceberry? Yes?
Use it in graves, on graves for.
That's right. They would wait for the ground used to be so hard you could not dig holes for funerals, and so they would wait for this tree to bloom, and then they could have services, right? So it's called the serviceberry tree. Okay, so here we've got some ideas of what we want to do, and we want to plant, and we need to think a little bit about how bees collect the nectar and pollen. Plant in large swaths, right? Same color clumps. because the bees don't have very good eyesight, but they do navigate through pheromones, and having the smells that some of those flowers let off to attract the pollinators will be stronger if you have them in larger clumps. Same thing with colors. Bees will collect nectar and pollen. They will work one group of flowers until they've got it all cleared out, and then they will move on to the next one. Native bees, like bumblebees, tend to run around, right? They're not floral. I forget the word for that. They're not loyal to just one flower. They'll move around. You want to reduce. I'm just going to tell you, don't plant turf grass at all. The University of Minnesota, Marla Spivak, who is a beekeeper, has developed some wonderful grass replacement, clover and other combinations. They're called microclovers that will provide nectar and pollen for bees, give you that still green look that you like, and be better for the ecosystem. And then in terms of, I often get asked, well, how many plants, trees, shrubs you need to plant? At least 6 different varieties blooming at once. That should be 26. Missouri Department of Conservation, which does manage, and this is where in their facility, they're concerned for native bees. They're really not concerned about honeybees because honeybees have advocates like us. But the native bees are the ones that have unique relationships with some plants. And so they want to see us increase the number of plants that we plant. So we're feeding not just the honeybees, but we're also feeding the native bees. And we're discouraging them from competing with each other. Some native bees only live for 6 to 8 weeks during the year. Honeybees are here all year round. Native bees are more efficient pollinators than honeybees are, but honeybees went out just because they're here longer. So you need to make sure that you're providing as much as you can in your gardens. And if you have only one thing that you want to plant a tree, a spring flowering tree. That's going to give you the biggest bang for the buck. So here are some of the trees and the range in which they bloom here in Missouri. You want to see willows and maples blooming in February. You'll see that the trees tend to stop blooming in July, sometimes June, depending on how hot the temperature gets. But these are probably the ones that are going to give you the best food source for your bees, requiring the least amount of work on your part. Now this is an example of my southern bee, berry, I call it the berry area. These were actually bee balm and native pink phlox that I planted. I claim I planted. I didn't plant it. The flowers themselves moved into that area because that was their optimum growing location. I didn't move them. I leave them there. I work around them if I had something else planted there. They found the right conditions to grow in and be healthy. Okay, so how you've got a vegetable garden and you're not getting the best yield. So how do you get a better yield? Plant flowers in the middle of your vegetables. The flowers are going to attract the pollinators, and they're going to come visit the zinnia, and they're going, oh look, there's some squash, there's some cucumbers. They're not necessarily going to be attracted to the vegetable garden unless you bring them there. Years ago, I had a lovely pollinator garden on one side of my house, and then I had my vegetables on the other side. And I thought, oh geez, that's not a good idea. So I had deck plants. So I sprayed the deck plants with sugar water, okay? And the bees were following the sugar water because I would not re-spray, I would just guide them to the vegetables. That's how I got my bees to find the vegetables. Now, it doesn't mean they're not going to do it on their own, but I was running out of time in the growing season and remembered that I needed to mix them versus keeping them separate. A lot of us tend to keep them separate. Don't do that. Mix them. Provide water within a half mile of your hives, right? I use bird baths with rocks and sticks. They know in the Honeybee Health Coalition report on nutrition, they said that bees like that dirty water, right? You sometimes see them. They won't touch brand new water, but they sure like the eau de mud that you get in a bird bath. They're looking for salts that they need for their diet that they can't find any other way. And then keep an eye on what they visit. One of my favorite things to do is to go to a home and garden center and look for bees. what plants are the bees landing on? If you don't know what bees would be attracted to, that's a fun way to take the family and the kids and go follow the bees. Okay, so this is one of my raised bed vegetable gardens that I had. Obviously, this is the end part of that other picture I showed you, but I keep bird baths within the areas where I want my bees to visit and to see what else is blooming. Okay, so we have annuals and perennials, right? Annuals live 1 year, perennials are the ones that live repeatedly once they get established. We have unwanted plants like weeds. As I said, I don't use the word weeds because a dandelion is an herb. When European settlers came to North America, the women sewed in the hems of their dresses dandelion seeds and daylily seeds, the orange flowers we call ditch lilies, because the whole daylily is edible, and the dandelion was their medicine cabinet, right? There are medicinal properties that you can use with dandelions. You can also make dandelion wine. We've lost the value of some of these plants that we have in abundance. And so I would challenge you to go look in your yard and look in your driveway. I call my driveway my nursery, because take a look at what's growing there. Learn to identify the baby plants that may be there. You may not have to go to a home and garden center and buy that 6-pack or that 12-pack of plant starters. You may have them in the yard, you just haven't recognized them. Okay, so here's some help in identifying plant varieties. The Missouri Botanical Garden has an excellent plant finder that you can go online, and you can just type in white tree that blooms in February, and you'll have a number of examples that will come up. If you're vegetable planting, the University of Missouri Extension has an excellent guide for that. And then if you're not sure about what fruit varieties grow well in our state, they have another guide that'll tell you that as well. Don't just go and get a blackberry bush out of your home and garden center, because there's some varieties that will grow well here and some that won't. Okay, so if you want trees, anybody been to the George White Nursery in Licking? Yeah, I'm a walking billboard for them. I've been planting their stuff for 40 years. So it's an excellent source for native seedlings. Inexpensive, $1 a seedling. I think it's 10 seedlings for $9. You can pick up, make sure that you go down to see them when they have their open house. I think it's April 6th this year. They take seeds from the land agencies in the state, Forest Service, MDC, Corps of Engineers. They take seeds from these land management agencies, and they raise those seeds for reforestation projects. And when they do that, they have extra. They sell those to the public, and you can get a catalog that they have. You can also go to their website and download the catalog from there. Grow Native, which is a Missouri Prairie Foundation program, has a ton of suggested places to find native trees and shrubs and flowers as well. And then I brought you a gift. I brought you my favorite catalog. It's a free catalog from the Missouri Wildflowers Nursery. And the reason I love this is not only are the pretty pictures, but on the edges, they'll tell you that these flowers are sun to light shade, average to wet soil. You can't just plop any plant into any soil. They have specific needs. And so before you leave, come up and grab one. These people are wonderful. They're out of Jefferson City, and they're very committed to planting native. If you've ever been on Highway 54 and you've seen these lovely purple fields of purple coneflowers blooming May and June, the founder of this nursery planted those 40 years ago. 40 years ago. So remember that as well. When you plant something, things are not going to bloom overnight. It may take them 3 years. 1 year to root, 1 year to shoot, and 1 year to fruit. And if you're on my limestone hillside garden, it could take longer, because it takes longer for the roots to find their way to a healthy place to grow. So these are great resources. In case you didn't know, I also write beekeeping books. I have 2 of them. Isabees has the Beekeeper's Diary, great book for beginning beekeepers. And it has the first chapter is about how to feed your bees naturally, which is a whole guide on how to plant for your bees. Bee Club Basics is one that the Missouri State Beekeepers Association asked me to write to help people when they're starting a bee club or they're reinvigorating a bee club. The Rolla Bee Club uses that book to run themselves. And then I'm working on Bees Need Flowers, Planning for Pollinators, and that book will be out in June if I stop lecturing and doing other things. But that's my goal, is to have it out right before Pollinator Week in June. Okay, so if you want some more information, I do blog, and I have homesweetbees.com, which is my blog on beekeeping, Gardening Charlotte, which is my blog on gardening. I also have a weekly newsletter called Garden Notes. You can sign up at my author's website. I just want to reconnect us all to nature in our gardens, because it's really a magical place if you can think about it past planting turf grass. So here's an example. I'm on a hillside. It does have a bit of a challenge to it. I don't have any grass. This will be what my garden will look like in another couple months. I have my hives scattered. I have I call it 9+1. I could have 5 nukes, I could have 8 nukes. It just depends what I'm doing in the year. But I have 9 hives that I do maintain throughout the year. My neighbor said nothing would grow on this plot when I moved in 1982. So here's my message to you. If I can become a monarch way station, a certified wildlife garden, a pollinator sanctuary, and a working apiary, you can do at least one of those on your property, because I'll bet it's not as hard to garden on as this one is. Okay, thank you. Any questions? Who wants their catalog?
I got a question for you.
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry.
In regards to where your hive is in the garden, it seemed like the bees, we have within my wife's garden area, but it's like 4, 5, 6 feet away is where the main garden is. Do they recognize that? I mean, or I thought when they come in and do the waggle, how do they do half just jump out the thing and you're there?
Well, I'm not a bee. However, I think that it depends on what you've got growing there, because it's about, they're going to see the colors, right? They're going to be attracted to the colors, that big swath of color that you might have. They may be also attracted to pheromones that we may not be able to pick up, that they can pick up. So you need to be planting from that list of plant families that I shared, because we know that those are the ones that provide nectar and or pollen to bees. Not every plant does that, so you need to just understand that they can find that. And worst comes to worst, spray the vegetables that you want them to visit with the sugar water, like I did, 2 parts sugar to 1 part water. And they were able to pick that up in no time. Within a week, they were flying over my deck and getting into the vegetable garden. So that's a shortcut. Yes, anybody else? Yes.
Yeah, first of all, thank you so much for a wonderful presentation.
Oh, you're welcome. My pleasure.
Nice. But quick question is we have some fruit trees that are providing fruit. It's about a quarter mile from our garden, and so this is our first year doing bees. Is there a specific amount of time that you would not move your hive around, say from fruit trees in the spring to the garden, or would you say never move it, or how do you do that?
Are you looking for pollination for your fruit trees?
Yes.
And they're a quarter mile of where the hives are.
Yes.
Okay, put up a little sign that says fruit trees this way. No, the bees will find them. They will, remember, they'll forage a 2-mile radius around where the hives are located. So as soon as the fruit trees are blooming, they will pick up on that. They'll be flying in and out. Yeah, I wouldn't move it. Don't move them unless you need to, but I wouldn't move them for that reason. Anybody else? Okay, thank you very much.
So while Scott's getting Eleanor set up, I just wanted to kind of introduce Eleanor. She's, like I said, she's got some different credentials now. Maybe she'll explain what NRCS is. I don't know. But she's the Illinois NRCS Pollinator Liaison and Project Windspan State Coordinator for the state of Illinois. She's going to talk about this project that started, for those of you that are on the mailing list, you got an email last month. Was their first workshop, or was it the beginning of this month?
Beginning of this.
Beginning of this month, and then the second workshop was last night. So there's a lot, it's gonna go throughout the year, so you're kind of jumping in, but I think those are recorded. You're gonna make them available. So you can get into this project that she's gonna talk about. We know Eleanor as the state inspector, or a state inspector for the state of Illinois for honeybees. So if any of you keep honeybees on the east side, as I did for a period of time, she had once a year, she would come and inspect my hives and make sure that they're disease-free. And she has been extremely helpful to a number of beekeepers on the east side who maybe don't have a mentor. She's been very important in the community for beekeepers. Now she's doing a lot of different things, so I'll let her tell you what she's doing.
Thank you so much, Jane. It's always a huge honor to be invited to present. When Jane invites me, I'm always really excited. So it's great to be here to talk to you tonight. It's really great to give a presentation basically about the same thing Charlotte just talked about. And that's the beauty of talking about planting for pollinators. You could have 10 people talking about it and you're going to learn completely different things. And it's so important. So it's great that more and more people are talking about this, and more people are adopting native plants into their landscapes. So I'm going to talk about honeybees, the benefits of pollinator habitat to honeybees, and other things. I've got like 100 slides, so I'm just going to rifle through them really quickly. Can you hear me in the back? Yay! All right, great. So yes, eco beekeeping and why St. Louis is the perfect place for it. So we're going to talk about the state of pollinators, the benefits of pollinator habitat, honeybees, and how they benefit from pollinator habitat, and how to become an eco beekeeper. Jane already gave me a really nice introduction, so I'll just reiterate so you know where I'm coming from. I've been an apiary inspector for the Illinois Department of Agriculture since 2010. I started working with Pollinator Partnership in 2020. I've worked in a couple different capacities. I got to work with the Natural Resources and Conservation Service, NRCS, for a few years, working with farmers, getting pollinator habitat on farms, and helping the workers who are boots on the ground on the farms, helping them have the right resources for getting pollinator habitat to farms. Right now what I'm doing is Project Wingspan. In Illinois, I'm the state coordinator for Project Wingspan. And we have volunteers all over the state. We have 30 teams. I've got 156 people listed as active volunteers throughout Illinois, every corner of the state. And they collect native wildflower seeds at prairies. We clean them and we redistribute all of them as plugs or seeds to different local pollinator habitat projects. So I love that work. I also, right now, I have 3 more months to go. I am the monthly columnist for the Basics of Beekeeping column at the American Bee Journal. I started writing that, the July issue was my first. Wow, it's a lot of work to write for the American Bee Journal. Probably not going to do that. If bee culture calls, I'm not answering. After a long time, I need to forget the pain of writing articles every month. How bad is the pollinator problem? Well, let's talk about what we're actually dealing with. $20 billion worth of United States products are pollinated by bees, butterflies, beetles, ants, and flies. But our farm and ranch lands that are supporting pollinators are disappearing at a rate of 3,000 acres per day. How is that even possible? Well, actually, if you think about the scope of our nation, we have a lot of acres that are in pollinator habitat projects that are taken out so they can be turned back into tillable land, and it happens every day. So another interesting thing to consider, and this always breaks my heart as an apiary inspector, it hurts the worst actually because I did it myself. We have native prairie, and we don't even know it's there because it's grown up in fescue, it's grown up in bush honeysuckle. You can remove the native species and you will be amazed. There are actually in the seed bank and also the roots, those plants are still there. But we come as beekeepers, and I did it too. It kills me every time I admit this. Well, great, here we have this wasted land. It used to be pasture land. We're gonna burn it down with chemicals, and I'm gonna put pollinator habitat. Well, little did I know, tons of spring ephemerals were growing there. And my next door neighbor, the organic farmer, who had never let any trees grow up on his, he had a bona fide prairie that he had intersowed with grass species to feed his organic beef. So I killed a prairie. Luckily, some of it's coming back. So yeah, heartbreaking, but we do it. And we do it acres and acres all over the country just because we think we're doing something good by planting for our bees, and we don't realize there's native prairie all over the place and what it needs to be cared for. Like a native prairie, remove invasive species and burn it. Okay, what's happening to pollinators? This is a Xerces Society. 28% decline in bumblebees, 19% of U.S. butterflies at risk of extinction, 50% of leafcutter bee species are at risk, and 27% of mason bee species are at risk. And we have all these non-native lady beetles that are causing problems for beneficial insects. So when we talk about working statistics, there's some that we want to be familiar with. If we're talking to someone who doesn't know that much about pollinators and we want to get them thinking like we are about pollinators, we need to remember these scientific references that have been long established. 75% of global food crops depend on pollinators. The USDA just reiterated that 2 years ago. 1 out of 3 bites of food we eat are because a pollinator visited a flower. That's hard statistic. And another, during a 15-year study, the U.S. Forest Service observed individual bee populations dropping by 60%. Here's a meme everyone has seen before. Jerry Hayes used to show it. He was the first person I saw show it. And other people too. Ed Spivak, I think he shows it too. So this is Whole Foods with bees and without bees. There's what you have to eat. So looking at where did those stats come from? That 75% of global food crops depend on pollinators. That's been around since 2005, and it's been reiterated so many times. The 1 out of 3 bites of food we eat are because a pollinator visited a flower. Since 1976, we've known that, and it continues to be reiterated. Declines in production are associated with pollinator decline. So these are sure facts. So, who are these pollinators? We'll take a quicker look at them. There are 4,000 species of native bees in the United States. And 70% of them are in the ground, nesting in the soil. They like bare soil. And this is why we like the warm season grasses and prairies. Those are bunch grasses, and at the base of them, you've got bare soil. Bees a lot of times like to dig in there. They like to dig in the sunny south-facing stream banks and mud cliffs, and they also like abandoned holes that were made by other insects. Then you've got 30% of the bees that live inside twigs, snags, dead trees. If you've got dead trees on your property, see if you can leave that. It's incredibly beneficial for wildlife. Bundles of reeds and wood blocks. We've got generalist bees. We've got specialist bees. Generalists are like our honeybees and bumblebees. They eat a lot of different sources of food. And then the specialists have only a very specific kind of food they're going to eat. Like the squash bee will only eat from the squash family. Okay, so what do we have here? What bees are even still out there? What native bees are we talking about? Who has survived our industrial agricultural revolution? So here across the river, north of Quincy, we have the Kid Life Station in Warsaw, Illinois. And in 2010, they did a survey. This guy here, Ken McCravey, he tracked 4,622 bees of 31 genera and 111 species. So lots of different stuff. It's interesting how many people have heard Ed Spivak talk? Raise your hand if you've heard his. He gives such a good presentation. He's such a wonderful guy. But he'll tell you, we're really not trapping bees that much anymore. It's killing a lot of bees. So a lot of studies are steering away from that now. So here's some stuff he found. He found the squash bee, really interesting. They'll stay in the flowers all night. They're great pollinators of pumpkins where you've got high population. He found the flat-tailed leafcutter bee. They're interesting because they'll cut those perfect round pieces out of a leaf. Maybe like you might have noticed it with your rose bushes. It takes them less than 2 seconds to cut that circle, and they're already flying before they're even done cutting. They roll it up and they wrap their little babies in it.
Oh.
I know. He found this cranberry pollinated bee, the mustached mud bee. That's one of the ones that lives in a cliff. It's interesting because they draw out these special entrances from the cliff, these kind of tubes where they go in. And it was interesting, they found that they can also live in shopping bags full of mud. And so they started wondering, can they manage colonies of these cranberry pollinating bees? Can they just put some mud in a bag and carry the bag to the next farm? I don't know. They're working on it. And he found 47 different, oh no, he didn't. He found some bumblebees. We have 47 different species of bumblebees in the United States. Of course, their buzz pollination is their most important feature for us. It's the way that they unhook their wings and buzz their whole body that dislodges all that pollen, and they're super efficient pollinators. They're the first and the last bees of the season to pollinate because they can tolerate much colder temperatures, and for that reason they get out earlier in the morning and they stay out later. So they're extremely important for pollinating. Okay, and here's some more fantastic bees he found of all different colors and types. I love these longhorn bees, the Melisodes. Of course, I love the, green. I probably am not pronouncing it right. Agapostamine. We need Mike Artiser here. Okay, speaking of Mike Artiser, and the local guys, well, what do we have here, right here in St. Louis? A fantastic study was done in, I don't have the date up here, 17, it was done in 2017. Gerardo Camillo, he runs the pollination ecology department at SLU University there. Mike Artiser and Ed Spivak, they found 198 different species of native bees right in St. Louis, and that they found was the highest diversity of native bees of any study that had been done in Missouri. And you would think there would be a higher diversity in all these wonderful prairies that Missouri Department of Conservation has worked hard to keep the quality of the prairies high. You also have the Missouri Prairie Foundation here, and yet right here in the city is where you have the highest diversity of native bees. Fascinating and encouraging. But how will we feed them? How will you feed them? Because I live in Illinois. But you can. We need biodiversity. So native plants co-evolved with native fauna. They came up here over the thousands of years, and the native plants provide the shelter and the food that those species are familiar with, and they provide their habitat and a corridor for them to travel and spread their genetics. So the benefits of native habitat, a lot of benefits for us actually, but with the native habitat we have the biodiversity, we have natural pest control from supporting beneficial insects that eat aphids and other pests that lay eggs in some of the caterpillars that attack our trees and our produce. Also, pollination services and soil and water health, so important. As Charlotte was talking about, the soil health. You've got to have pollinators for the plants that hold that soil. Okay, so pollinators and beneficial insects. Let's talk a little more about that natural pest control. This slide is weird. It was an afterthought. We're moving on. Okay, yes, here we are. That's what I meant to show you. Syrphid fly larvae are amazing. They eat aphids and small-bodied pests. And there's a syrphid fly, and there's lots of different pollinating flies. And they just have these ravenous larvae. One larva can eat up to 400 aphids. And then the adults visit flowers in search of nectar and pollen. Green lacewings. How many people saw a lacewing last summer? Yeah, they're out there and they're great. And one reason why they're great is because they evolved. One of their traits they evolved was to lay their eggs way up on a filament. That is because the larva of a lacewing is so hungry it will eat all the eggs if they're not up on that filament. They eat everything in their path. So lacewings are so important. They're a fantastic beneficial insect for pest control. Okay, let's talk about bees and what they offer us on the economic side of things, and what I can tell my conventional farmer husband why these bees are more than just honey. So sustainability, crop yields, economic growth, and soil and water health. That's all of interest to us farmers. Soybean yields increased between 6% with wild pollinators and 18% with honeybees. And there's a lot of studies just coming out in the past 2 and 3 years that 18% really holds. Honeybees can really increase soybean yield. Yep, there's another one from 2017. And the benefits of native and honeybee populations on self-pollinating crops, there was a 15% increase in cotton yields and 12 to 16% increase in canola yields. That was a study that came out a couple years ago. We definitely need native plants to stabilize banks, to stabilize our soil, to neutralize the chemicals, the nutrients from running into the waterways, and we have practices. Jane said, what is NRCS? That Natural Resource Conservation Service working with the farmers. They have a new practice that's very popular now called prairie strips, and they're giving substantial resources to farmers who are willing to plant strips of prairies to contain soil on farms, to contain the nutrients on the farms, to keep it out of the water. So it's a great practice and it's real new. And that's one of the reasons why we are valuing these pollinator plants so much. Look at the root depth. Some of these plants, this mark right there is 15 feet. Yeah, and look at a plant like all the way that purple one, the purple flower all the way on the left, that is purple prairie clover. The roots go 15 feet down into the ground. So it's fantastic. And there, we talked about turf grass. How worthless is it? If you could see that tiny little scribble all the way on the left, green on top, black on the bottom, I mean, it doesn't go but 3 inches into the soil. It's useless. All right, so pollinator habitat is so important for your bees. Bees need 3.4 to 4.3 milligrams of pollen per day. And they need higher pollen diversity. Pollen has been shown to upregulate peptides in immune response to deformed wing virus. Oh, how I wish I would have grabbed every study so that I could have put when you write for the American Bee Journal, the nice thing is it takes forever, and then you have to give a bibliography to Eugene, but you don't have to write your little number after every statement that you make from a study. Well, I wish I had, because then I could give you what study said what, and oh, it takes a long time to do that. So sorry, you have to believe me. If you want to know the sources, go read my article, because I've got a bibliography there. Diverse fresh pollen is shown to aid bee immunity against nosema and sackbrood. Bees need 10 critical amino acids, and there they are. I think, Charlotte, you said they needed more, didn't you? 11. Well, I wonder what that one I'm missing is. I'll have to go back to the books. And yes, so pollinator habitat builds fat bodies. And fat bodies store essential amino acids and fatty acids that's also out there in the pollen. These nutrients are the building blocks of the peptide synthesis. The pathogens elicit fat body responses, and the ingested macronutrients influence the genetic immunity expression. So there's a lot of research looking into this, and the better their diet, the fresh pollen that they're bringing in, the healthier they're going to be, the better they are to respond to toxins and pathogens. An example, oh wait, let's see, did I miss something? Well, it's pretty much all the same. I mean, fatty acids, they're helping an immune response, and they're counteracting several specific pathogen stressors, such as linoleic acid, omega-6, that inhibited the growth of American and European foul brood. So, another study that's so exciting, at the U of I Adam Dolezal lab, they found beehives in suburban and agricultural landscapes were losing weight in August. This was just sort of a given that was happening in all the landscapes that were agricultural or suburban. And that's going on right when the adult bees are raising the winter bees. So then he found that the hives that were in close proximity to prairie ecosystems kept or added to their stores and were better prepared for winter, and that's going to give you better, stronger winter bees to go through your winter. So what flowers should you plant? You should plant all of them. And here's why. Ecology is in a constant flux. So the factors are always changing. It's never the same. The bee's nutritional needs and health status is always changing. The weather conditions are always changing. Plant community composition is always changing. Who has pollinator habitat here? Raise your hand. All right, we've got a lot of people with pollinator habitat. And you're going to notice from year to year, you see different things blooming. It never looks the same. So the plant community composition is always changing. And these factors change from year to year, and they change day to day. So bees always change their preferred species, but looking through a lot of literature, year to year, different studies were finding, oh, they like this year, they like that this year. So to reiterate a lot of what Charlotte was saying, they love asters. Any kind of asters, the bees are all over them. Goldenrods, milkweeds are very valuable for honeybees. Wild bergamot, that's in the mint family. Evening primrose is a great plant bees like. Silphiums, bees like all these fantastic dinosaur-looking plants with enormous leaves and long, strong stalks that put their yellow flowers up at the top. Partridge pea is grown on the roadsides. It's all over the place. It's real easy to grow. It's not a high-quality native wildflower, but it's so valuable for bees, and honeybees love it. It's so good for them. Prairie clover and coneflowers, all highly attractive and very good for honeybees. So you should become an eco-beekeeper. Look at this eco-beekeeper. She's so cute and happy. And look at that garden. She has this garden registered under all kinds of programs. It's gosh, I can't even remember all of them, but she's a Monarch Way Station 2, and a couple of the other ones you named. She may be that too. It's anything you can do to raise awareness, register your garden, and plant specifically for certain programs. It really adds value to what you're doing for your ecosystem. Okay, so what can you do? How do you do this? How do you get started? Think about Pollinator Week. What are you going to do for Pollinator Week? Last year, Pollinator Week was June 19th. I think this year it starts June 17th. It's always that third week in June. You've got to do something. If you don't do anything, at least buy one of the Pollinator Partnership shirts. They have a beautiful artistic shirt that comes out every year, and that's one way to show that you care and raise awareness. Let me tell you about my Pollinator Week real quick. It was outrageous. Oh, I had a friend. She was one of the volunteers, and for Project Wingspan, and we went in October to collect seeds. We were carpooling. She came to pick me up, and she saw my planters that were full of what do you call those flowers? Petunias. They were full of petunias, and she said, "What are you And you've got planters full of petunias that you water and look all scraggly. Why don't you plant a pollinator garden? You don't even have to water it. I'm like, I don't have time to plant a pollinator garden. I'm working all these jobs. I'm talking to volunteers all day. You think I got time for that? She said, you plant a pollinator garden in Pollinator Week, I'll bring you plants. I said, okay, if you're helping me. So I went out, I didn't even ask my husband, and I sprayed herbicide all in front of the porch. And guess what? He didn't even bat an eye. He has been all about this pollinator garden, but I've had him in mind, so we're coming up on Pollinator Week, and I bought all of these river rock bags on Memorial Day. You get some good sales. And these bags of rocks were on sale, and so I made this strip right along the edge, in between the grass and the pollinator garden. My last name is Schumacher. We have a lot of Germans here. Germans. Straight lines, and we don't need the lawnmower. Like, whoa, is that a plant? Is it lawn? Like, we need a straight line. So that rock, I'm glad I have it. I have the support of all the Germans in my life. So here's what. And let me completely change the subject. Jane was just talking about the homegrown native plant webinar series. Yesterday, we had the second episode. That was our big episode. It was supposed to happen, oh, it's so exciting, at the new greenhouse at the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers at Riverlands. Does everyone know where Riverlands is? West Alton, right there across from Alton. You know, they've got the lock and dam there, and so the water backs up and all these birds come and they're migrating and they're hanging out in the water, and pollinators too, the monarchs. I mean, it's a great place for a migratory station for all kinds of animals and insects. So they just built a greenhouse and they just had their ribbon cutting, and it's really exciting because U.S. Army Corps of Engineers started a program called the Great Rivers Pollinator Habitat Partnership, and everybody in the whole St. Louis area, Missouri and Illinois was invited, all the pollinator people. And we're trying to add partners all the time. We can't have too many partners. Gerardo Camillo, we mentioned him. Ed Spivak, we mentioned him. Jane, if you're not in it, you're in it. You're in it. But Jane's one of the supporters of the Homegrown Native Plant webinar series. So, anyways, yeah, so we were supposed to broadcast live from the new greenhouse, and I got there. But everybody I needed to work with was in Alton, where they didn't salt the streets until 4 p.m., and so nobody could come. They tried. They're calling me on the phone like, we're sliding down the hill in our car. Please stay home. So we all just did it from home, and we made a webinar anyways, and it was fine, but we didn't get to do it from the greenhouse. What we did yesterday was we demonstrated how to germinate native wildflower seeds and how easy it is. So with what I do with Pollinator Partnership, we have all these volunteers and we're going to all these prairies and collecting very specific common native wildflowers. So I save a couple seed heads from different species, and then I'll take a couple seed heads and I'll sprinkle those seeds right now on some soil. This is not the typical way to cold stratify your seeds. You can do it in the refrigerator with vermiculite or sand, and you're done with it. It's much easier. I like to do it this way. I don't know why, I just don't want to put seeds in my refrigerator. I have enough weird stuff in my refrigerator. It's terrible, actually. So I just want this outside, and I like going outside because now the seeds are on the dirt. I laid my chicken wire over all that because our cats, otherwise they'll be digging in it, and squirrels and stuff. We don't want that. So chicken wire over the top, really easy. And then I have to go out there and I have to make sure that it stays moist. If you're interested in doing a prairie restoration, wait. Get a lot of advice, read about it. It's kind of like beekeeping in that it takes a couple, 2-3 years just to learn the basics. So the difference between that, prairie keeping, and beekeeping though is you can get your bees and you can learn while you're keeping them. With prairies, you don't want to do that right away because like the mistake I made, I didn't know enough and then I killed all these really important state-listed species of spring ephemerals. A tragedy. Some of them are still there. and I'm gathering the seeds and I'm putting them back too. But yeah, you need to rely on the community. There's more and more people getting into it. There's more and more resources, more and more non-government organizations, agencies here to help you. So if you're interested in pollinator habitat, build your team of professionals. And St. Louis is an amazing place to do that. It's an awesome community. There's Wild Ones. St. Louis Wild Ones is an excellent group. There's also Grow Native, as Charlotte was talking about. Missouri Prairie Foundation is an amazing organization. And then in Illinois, I mean, you probably have an Audubon Society. We've got the Illinois Audubon Society. We've got the Illinois Native Plant Society. Where St. Louis Wild Ones is helping the Southern Illinois Wild Ones chapter reform. And we've got Project Wingspan. So we've got all these master naturalists going all around Edwardsville and Alton and down to Waterloo, to these fantastic prairies, collecting native wildflower seeds, and these communities are really fun, really fantastic people. So hopefully someday in Missouri you'll have Project Wingspan, but in the meantime you're totally welcome to come on over to Edwardsville or Waterloo or Alton and join us on a seed collection event and learn more about these different species and how you can incorporate them into your own landscapes.
The Zoom recordings for the events that you've had, is that streamlined? I mean, are people, because somebody said to me last night that they wanted to, they couldn't access it, or I don't know, maybe it just wasn't available yet?
The YouTube is up. All you have to, I sent the link around to all the people who have attended and to the partners. All you have to do is go on YouTube, go to Pollinator Partnership, and it's probably the most recent video that was added. It's just the Homegrown Native Plants webinar series on the Pollinator Partnership YouTube channel. And then we had a good turnout yesterday. It wasn't as big as our first class, and I wonder if it's because I threw too many links out there, because I had some people saying like, I'm clicking on the link, and nobody's here. I'm like, well, you must be clicking on the other link. I'm sure you are clicking on the link for the Project Wingspan training. That's the only reason why that would be happening. So, yeah. Oh, you have a question in the back?
Yes, what do you recommend for a new septic field planting?
Boy. So I don't actually know much about septic seals. Like, if they are high nutrient, then that is a great question. Gee whiz, what do you think, Charlotte?
I couldn't hear the question.
Septic
What do you-
fields with the plant.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, what would you plant there?
Clover.
Clover. I think that's actually an excellent suggestion. Clover, for one, is going to be good for your bees. For two, it's nitrogen fixing. Thank you. Yeah. And then also, it's a good nurse plant if you realize you want to plant something else there. Yeah, I don't know enough about that. Like deep roots, are they going to, be a weird thing? I don't know. I can't answer that. Sorry. I would Google that. Yeah.
So you deal a lot with Circe lespedeza, which is horrible in some certain areas,
Yeah.
and kill spray. I mean, then you're killing other seeds.
Boy, that's a sad one. Yeah, I mean, that's a burn down kind of situation with chemicals. That's what I see people doing. That's what I see the land managers doing. It's so aggressive. I mean, but if it's not aggressive yet, gosh, I can think of a lot of people dealing with it, and it's always herbicide. But it seems like go out before it sets seed, and it's setting seed in, I think, late September, early October, when it's easy to recognize because it's tall and it's got small leaves, so you can cut it and spray it. Spray it with herbicide right at the base as soon as you cut it. If you don't have a lot of it, but if you've got a lot of it, there's a prairie we work with just north of Springfield, Illinois. He had acres that he just completely burned all of those acres down because it was so infested with Sericea lespedeza. It's a
The one
problem.
plant can produce 3,000 seeds in a year.
Yeah, and
So
the
it
problem
sits in the soil
too,
for 20 years.
and it's easy to spread by animals and even seed collectors if they're not careful. You gotta have the right shoes that aren't picking up seeds. And try not to walk through the Sericea lespedeza when it's, getting into flowering and afterwards.
I mean, I've used pasture garden. Is there anything any better than that that's out there as of today?
Off the top of my head, I can't think of what they're recommending right now, what actual herbicides, so I'd have to Google that one, but I know that there's a lot of, Missouri Department of Conservation might actually have a really good resource on that too.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions? All right, yeah,
I just had more of a comment because I had this thing happen to me the other day that both your talks were phenomenal, and this connection to all these free plants. But I have a yard in Crestwood, and I own about 20 feet outside of my fence, and the park board wants to come in and redo that area. It's all just scrap stuff, and they're planting all these native plants. They hired someone to come do this.
awesome.
And so I went out to chat with them, and they said, if you'd like help with your backyard, we can do that too. And it's all free.
Yeah.
And
it's
you
so
want
great.
help designing? We can help design it for free. And they said, I got a tree that died in my front yard. We have another program that's called the Street Side Program. Anything we can see from the street, they'll replant trees for free. So it's just, so talk to even your local people, because everybody's got these programs now. It's phenomenal.
Yeah, it's amazing. St. Louis is the place to do it.
Yeah.
It's so exciting, and it's only gonna get better. So
That's
get
wonderful.
involved. Yeah, don't let these opportunities go.